Good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead and turn in your Bibles to the Gospel of Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7. And just keep it open, because I'm going to bounce back between Luke chapter 7 and Luke chapter 5. So let's just go ahead and read this story again. We read it last week, but let's read it again. In verse 36, it says that one of the Pharisees desired him that he would eat with him. And he went into the Pharisee's house, and he sat down to meat. And behold, a woman in the city, which was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus at meat in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster box of ointment, and stood at his feet behind him, weeping, and began to wash his feet with her tears, and did wipe them with the hairs of her head, and kissed his feet, and anointed them with the ointment. Now when the Pharisee which had bidden him saw it, he spake within himself, saying, This man, if he were a prophet, would have known who and what manner of woman this is that touched him, for she is a sinner. And Jesus answering said unto him, Simon, I have somewhat to say unto thee. And he said, Master, say on. There was a certain creditor which had two debtors, and one owed 500 pence, and the other 50. And when they had nothing to pay, he frankly forgave them both. Tell me therefore, which one of them will love him most? And Simon answered and said, I suppose he that to whom he forgave the most. And he said unto him, Thou hast rightly judged. And he turned to the woman, and he said unto Simon, See thou this woman? I entered into thine house, and thou gave me no water for my feet. But she has washed my feet with her tears, and wiped them with the hairs of her head. Thou gave me no kiss, but this woman, since the time that I came in, has not ceased to kiss my feet. My head with oil thou didst anoint, but this woman hath anointed my feet with ointment. Wherefore I say unto thee, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loves little. And he said unto her, Thy sins are forgiven. And they that sat at meat with them began to say within themselves, Who is this that forgives sins also? And he said unto the woman, Thy faith hath saved thee. Go in peace. Okay, so we've been talking over the last several weeks about being a disciple of Christ, and what are the three things that a disciple is to do? Number one, just be with Jesus. Pay attention to his presence in your life. Number two is to be like Jesus. And then number three is to do what Jesus did. And that gives us a little pause. It could be our own humility. It could be a lack of faith, but it gives us a little pause. But Jesus, he made a statement to his disciples, and he told them, and he said, Truly, or verily, verily, I say unto you, that he that believes on me, the works that I do, he shall do also. And greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father. So what does that mean when Jesus said that those that believe in me, my words, my works, will do greater works than I have done? What does that mean? And that's a good question. I've read a lot of things about what the word greater means. There's different interpretations. But we can agree that regardless of what the exact meaning is, greater does not mean lesser. Now, I know that some of you are thinking that I'm setting the bar a little high, but I'm not setting the bar high. This is the bar that Jesus Christ himself set. He said these words as if you could really do greater things. So you remember we talked about this a couple weeks ago. The story in the Gospels where a 12-year-old boy fed 5,000 people. And you're thinking rightly that no, in that story Jesus fed 5,000 people. Well, no, let's go over that story again. Jesus has been teaching all day, and the people are hungry, and they're tired, and they're famished. And so he just turned to his disciples, and he said, Feed them. That was the command, just feed them. And you remember the reactions that they had. The disciples started giving excuses. They started giving reasons. And they started saying things that were extraordinary. One of the disciples said this, if we had $20,000, we couldn't feed all of these people. The implication being, we don't have $20,000, and even if we had $20,000, we couldn't feed them. Another one of the disciples said, you know what, we need to cut them loose. Let them take care of themselves, send them away. And they were just giving excuses after excuses after excuses, much like what we do. When the Spirit of God tells us, when we are paying attention, He tells us to do something. And we start, I don't have the resources for that, or you know what, somebody else can take care of them. But there was just one little boy. It says he was a lad, and that word means he was under 12 years old. One little boy, when he heard Jesus say, feed them, well, he just simply gave Jesus everything he had. And Jesus took what that boy had and He fed thousands and thousands of people with that. And things are like that today. You see, Jesus Christ is looking for people that He can trust with His power. And the person that Jesus Christ can trust with His power is the person that trusts Jesus with their possessions, or their time, or their reputation, or whatever it is that you may have. So let's do it. We're a disciple. We're going to be with Jesus. We're going to be like Jesus. And we're going to do what Jesus did. Okay. Now that raises a question. What did Jesus do? What did He? Give me some answers. He what? Healed people. That's the first thing we think of, right? We're always thinking of the miracles, and we think of the miracles, and this is what Jesus did to usher in the kingdom of God, and that's the first thing we think about. So he did what? He turned the water into wine. What else did He do? He healed people. What else? Walked on water. What else?
Raised Lazarus from the dead.
Raised Lazarus. That's a big one. Yeah. Anything else?
He just loved them.
Okay. He just loved them. But yeah, we think of the miracles. The miracles are the things. And that's when it gives us pause. When I say do the things that Jesus did, it gives us a little bit pause because Jesus did things that are impossible to do. I mean, the miracles, they're signs and they're impressive and they get a lot of publicity. They do. That's why you see the people on television. They're always trying to sell you something so you can have these signs and miracles in your life as well. But now I want you to stop and think about it for a moment. In the scriptures, here in the Gospel of Luke, there is some space that's given to the miracles. And Scott, just a few weeks ago in our Sunday school class, he went over the miracles and those things. But I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to think about this before you give me an answer. How many people did Jesus heal that actually became His follower? Can you think of any? Any of the 12? What about the others? Any of them? Well, what else? Okay, casting out devils. That's a big one. A lot of people like to do that. It's flashy and impressive. But how many people did Jesus cast devils out of that actually followed Him? The only one we know of is Mary Magdalene. Correct? Yeah, I mean, the miracles are impressive. How many lepers even came back to thinking? 1 out of 10. 10%. Right? Of the tens of thousands that were fed by that Red Sea, when He fed 5,000 men and their wives and their kids with 5 loaves of bread, how many of them became His follower? 0. They all went away. In fact, Jesus even turned to His disciples and asked them, are you going to go away too? So when we talk about doing what Jesus did, maybe the miracles were not the most effective thing that Jesus did. Now John, the gospel writer, at the end of his gospel, he made it plain. He said, the things that we've written are only a small part of it. If all the things that could be written, the world itself couldn't contain the books. And so the gospel writers, they only included those things that they felt were absolutely necessary. And there's no comprehensive list of miracles, but there's also not a comprehensive list of what Jesus did. But I think there are three basic rhythms that Jesus lived throughout his life. Number one, Jesus made space for the gospel. And number two, he preached the gospel. And number three, he demonstrated the gospel. These are the things that Jesus did. And as a disciple of Christ, we are to do the things that Jesus did. You'll notice I use the word rhythm, and I use that word on purpose. Last week when we were talking about those that you consider to be a true disciple of Christ, one person mentioned a precious lady by the name of Lorene. And this is the phrase that she used. She just floated through life. And so I use the word rhythm because that appears that that's what Jesus did. You never see him getting in a hurry. You never see him under a time crunch. You never see him overwhelmed. You never see him he just led his life to a rhythm. It's almost like he was dancing to a song that only he could hear. And that's the way I think we're supposed to live our life. What do most of us do? We have a schedule, don't we? We have a schedule. This is the time that I'm supposed to read my Bible. And this is where I pray for 10 minutes. And this is the day that I'm supposed to get to church. And this is the time that I'm supposed to pay somebody a compliment. And this is when I put money in the plate. But Jesus didn't live his life as if there were a series of activities that he had to get done. Jesus just lived his life following his Father, wherever that would go. One day he said, we need to go through Samaria. Another day he said, I'm going to go to the pool of Bethesda. Another day he went into the temple. He lived his life according to this rhythm. And what happened is every time he encountered somebody, Jesus responded to that person through the Spirit of God. One time the Bible says that he helped these people because he was moved with compassion. Now let that trickle down into you. Jesus Christ did what he did when he was moved with compassion. And when I'm saying that we are to do what Jesus did, don't you think that we are to respond when we are moved to compassion? When our heart is calling us? When there's a longing that's drawing us? Yes, do as Jesus did and live your life in a rhythm. Dance to a song that only you hear. And this Baptist preacher's telling you it's okay to dance. So make room for the gospel. Preach the gospel and demonstrate the gospel. So how did Jesus make room for the gospel? How do we make room for the gospel? Well, we make room for the gospel when we do what Jesus did. And what did Jesus do? Well, he done a lot of things, but the one I want to focus on today is Jesus done a lot of eating and drinking. Really, go back and read your Gospels and see how much of the Gospels takes place around the table. How much of the story we just read? What's going on? We're having a dinner. Jesus is at that dinner. Read the Gospel of John sometime, and you're going to find that over half of that Gospel takes place around the dinner table or a table of some sort. They're either at a wedding, or they're at a feast, or they're at the Last Supper, and the great bulk of that Gospel is just Jesus eating with people. Just spending time with them. One great example is this. Jesus is passing through the city of Jericho, and as he's passing through the city of Jericho, the people, of course, they've heard about him, and they've heard about the miracles. And so what are they doing? Well, they're crowding around Jesus, and they're pressing him, and they're tugging at the hem of his garment, and they're pulling him this way, and they're pulling him that way, and as they're going along the street, Jesus sees a man sitting in a tree. And remember, he just lived his life to a rhythm. And he sees this man sitting in the tree, and Jesus stops. And then he calls that man by name. And then what does he do? Jesus invites himself to this man's house for dinner. Now, you remember that story. This is a story of Zacchaeus, or Zacchaeus. He was a wee little man. A wee little man was he. But you know what? There's little more than just Jesus inviting himself to dinner. Zacchaeus was a collaborator with the occupying military force in Jerusalem. He was, by most people's standards, he was a traitor. I like to watch some documentaries, and I watch these documentaries about the American army liberating the countries in Europe, and they go liberate Belgium, and they liberate Paris, and all these things. And then you always see in these documentaries that the people, they've been liberated, and they're waving flags, and they're all happy and excited, but then one of the things that they do is they start grabbing people out of the crowd. They grab these people out of the crowd, and I seen one of them where they got these women, and they put these women down on their knees, and they started shaving their hair off. And you know why they were doing that? Because these were the ladies that collaborated with the occupying German troops. And of course the men who collaborated, well, they were just killed. They were just shot right then and there. And this is the way the Jews would have seen Zacchaeus. He would have been hated. And what do you see Jesus doing? Eating and drinking with him. Jesus goes to his house. Now, as a result of this, Zacchaeus became a disciple of Jesus Christ. A lot of people who had been helped by the miracles didn't follow Jesus. But this man that Jesus ate with became a follower of Jesus Christ. Now, this is a heartwarming story, and we see the kids sing the songs about it, but the others who saw Jesus eating with Zacchaeus, they muttered and they murmured, and they said that Jesus is hanging out with the wrong sort of people. In fact, they were offended by what Jesus did. And there's a reason for this. Meals are boundary markers. They always have been. What it means is the person you're willing to eat with, that's where you're drawing the line in the sand. If you're willing to eat with them, they're on this side of the line. If you're not willing to eat with them, they're on the other side of the line. And it's always been this way. It's always been this way through recorded history, and especially in first century Jewish people. There was a boundary marker, and you were either in or you were either out. And who you chose to eat with, that determined it. Anybody here, any of you, old enough to remember when they would have signs in restaurants that said whites only? None of you are that old, thank goodness. In England, they had signs that said no Irish, no blacks, no dogs. Boundary markers. This is because people mark their boundaries by who they eat with. Even today, restaurants are stratified by social standing, isn't it? It is. There's a restaurant that I really love. I love it. I love to eat there. And Karen and I, we only eat there on rare occasions because it's so expensive. We can't eat there. When we do eat there, I try to eat as much as I pay. So anyway, and I was telling a buddy of mine, I said, we got to eat at this restaurant. We ate at this restaurant. It was our anniversary. We ate at the restaurant. And this is what my brother said, and I'm going to quote. My buddy, he said this, ooh, eating at the fancy restaurant, I see. Well, that same buddy who pointed out that we were eating at the fancy restaurant, this same guy saw us eating at the Mexican restaurant across from the police station, and he didn't say, ooh, fancy restaurant, because he was eating there too. Where you eat, who you eat with, it denotes where your boundaries are. Who you eat with, that is the boundary that you set up on who is welcome and who is not. And this has been true throughout all of history. It's called table fellowship. We have the term fellowship, and we use that a lot. To eat with someone, that's a sign of welcome. Not only are you allowed into their home, or they're allowed into your home, but what you're saying is this is a person who's in good standing with me, and therefore in good standing with God. I mean, do you wonder why Jesus invited himself to Zacchaeus' house? Because Zacchaeus had stopped inviting anyone to his house. They never came. And so Jesus had to take that step. This is what Jesus did. He was declaring that the kingdom of God he had been discussing, Zacchaeus was welcome there. And he did that with something as non-miraculous as a meal. And it's not just that one time. Jesus was always eating with people. He was always talking to people. He was always hugging people. Of those lepers that Jesus healed, do you realize that Jesus Christ put his arm around the leper? Everyone else was hollering, unclean, unclean, and Jesus didn't see him that way. One theologian I read, he said this. He said, Jesus Christ got crucified because of the people he ate with. And who did he eat with? Well, he ate with the sinners, the unclean, the publicans, the prostitutes, Samaritans, Gentiles. One description of Jesus is that he was a glutton and a wine bibber. And that's not a compliment. You see, Jesus erased all the boundary markers. And he used something as simply as food as a way to invite people into the kingdom of heaven. Here we just read the Gospel of Luke, and we see the story about Simon the Pharisee and Jesus eating there. In Luke's Gospel, there are over 50 references to food. I mean, all throughout the Gospel, Jesus is either going to a meal, at a meal, or coming from a meal. Is this a Jesus that you could get along with? Absolutely. In fact, there are two phrases in Luke's Gospel, and that sum it up very nicely. One phrase is this: the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which is lost. That's his mission, correct? You'll agree with that? And if we're going to be like Jesus, that's to be our mission as well, correct? Absolutely. So his mission is to seek and to save that which is lost. What was his method? Turn back to Luke chapter 5. I can't find it anywhere. I'm sure it's in this Bible somewhere. Okay. I could be absolutely wrong. You know what? Don't bother turning there. It'll come up later, I'm sure. But the phrase is this: the Son of Man came eating and drinking. So what's his mission? To seek and to save that which is lost. What's the method that he used? Eating with them. That's how Jesus did it. That was his method. You see, Jesus lived in a culture that's a lot like our culture. And there's a lot of hostility to the gospel, that's true. So how did Jesus invite people into the kingdom of heaven? One meal at a time. The New Testament word for that is called hospitality. And that's one of the things that, you know, when you're looking at somebody, if they're qualified to be a pastor, it says that they must be given to hospitality. And what does that mean? Well, it's a Greek word, and that Greek word is philoxenia. And what that literally means is this: you have to love the stranger. Well, one of the words that gets bandied about too much in today's culture is the word xenophobia, where you're afraid of the stranger, you're afraid of somebody that looks different, you're afraid of somebody that doesn't fit. No. As a New Testament believer, you're to love the stranger. That's called hospitality. You are to make them welcome. So how do you love a stranger? Well, it's the act of welcoming them, eating with them, turning a stranger into a guest. And guests become neighbors, and neighbors become brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. You see, Jesus never forced anyone to become a disciple. We don't ever see him using the high-pressure sales techniques that a lot of evangelists do. We don't see him pleading and pulling and persuading and all those things. But what we do see is that Jesus made room for them. in his life where a change could occur. So when I say that as a disciple of Christ, you are to do what Jesus did, and you think to yourself, well, you can't walk on water. Well, I don't know if you can walk on water or not, but I'm pretty certain that everybody here can eat. In fact, some of you look like you're pretty good at it. You know, our world is full of strangers and the estranged. And we're a culture that wants to divide itself by race and gender and political ideology. But what Jesus did is he erased the boundaries that the world has set up. It is possible for you to show people that they are welcome, not only at your table, but at God's table. So do what it is that Jesus did. So what did he do? I don't know if you can heal the sick. And if you ever want to try, I've got a list of people that we can go see. But you can eat with somebody, can't you? Can you hold the door open for them? Can you greet a stranger with a smile? Can you offer a genuine compliment to somebody? Can you talk to somebody that doesn't look like you? You can talk to somebody who doesn't look like you, even if they voted for that idiot that you did not vote for. You can talk to a person that everyone else considers a sinner. Do what Jesus did. He ate with people. So why don't we do that more? Why don't we? Why are we not engaged in fellowship, hospitality? Well, one reason is it's incredibly inconvenient, isn't it? I mean, it is. It's a hassle to prepare food. And then you got to clean up afterwards. And then you're busy. And of course, you got to be at work the next day. And to be honest, some people just are not that good at being a guest. And it's expensive to buy food nowadays. And if you could eat out, but oh my goodness, you have to make choices between eating out and paying the power bill. It's incredibly inconvenient. And it's going to take up some of your time. And it's not as cheap as standing over the kitchen sink eating a can of Vienna sausages out of your hand. I've done it. It is inconvenient. But a disciple of Christ does the things that Christ did. And eating is something that Jesus did. And the best part about it is it's something you're already doing, aren't you? It's not a forced action. I'm sure most of you have a regular meal time, but you pretty much can eat anytime, can't you? If I forced you, you could do it, couldn't you? Absolutely you could. Jesus lived by a rhythm. He just let things happen. And any one of you can do this. You don't have to have a theology degree to invite somebody to sit at the table with you. You don't have to have all the answers to their Bible questions. All you have to have is a table and a willingness to accept somebody that might be a little different from you. So when we talk about doing what Jesus did, one of the things that Jesus did is he made room for the gospel. And so what does it mean to make room for the gospel? It means to make room for people in your life. It could be a meal. It could be during your coffee break at work. It could be at the ball game. It could be at the campground. It could be into your home. I mean, what's the number one reason that people stay at a church? It's not because of preaching. Well, it's not here because of preaching. What's the number one reason they stay? Because they feel welcome. That's it. That's it. It's not about theology or doctrines or beliefs or anything like that. It's because they feel welcome. So do what it is that Jesus did. Is it inconvenient? Yeah. And what I'm telling you a little unconventional? Might be. But I think that the underlying reason that people don't make room for the gospel like Jesus did. Okay, John said it this way in his gospel. He said that Jesus Christ came unto his own, and his own received them not. And literally what that means is they didn't make room for Jesus. There wasn't room for Jesus in their life. They had stuff going on. They had careers. They had positions. They had stuff to take care of. They had things. You remember those three guys came to Jesus, they're going to be his disciple? One of them couldn't be his disciple because he had guests at the house. One of them couldn't be a disciple because he's waiting on his daddy to die. One of them couldn't be a disciple because he had some mules that he had to, not mules, Jews didn't have mules. he had a team of oxen that he needed to break in. They weren't making room for Jesus. And that's what John said. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But then John says this, but as many as received him, as many as made room in their life for Jesus, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even them that believed on his name. So what's that mean? For those of you that make room in your life for Jesus, he's giving you permission. He's giving you the power to live like a son of God or a daughter of God, as the case may be. He's giving you position. But the problem is this. Although you've been given permission to live like a son or a daughter of God, most of us are still living like the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve. We still carry the residue of the fall in our bones. And the residue of the fall is this: fear, laziness, pride. So one of the reasons that we don't make room for others, it's just laziness. I mean, it's a lot of work to have somebody over for dinner. It's inconvenient. Absolutely. I love to cook. I absolutely love to cook. Karen hates it when I cook because she has to clean up afterwards. And then you have to pick the house up because, oh cow, we don't want anybody to see how we really live. And worse yet, what if the person you invite over is a vegan or something? You're going to have to do some research on how to cook Brussels sprouts without bacon grease. And so, yeah, it's a lot of trouble. And even if you don't invite them over, say, yeah, let's meet at the restaurant. We live in rural Roane County, don't we? It's 20 minutes to get to a restaurant. So it's 20 minutes there, and then it's 20 minutes back. That's 40 minutes. You're going to spend at least an hour there, even if you can't find anything to talk about. And so the next thing you know, 3 hours of your life is gone. Correct? And you just don't have time for that, right? I mean, after all, you got some things going on. After work, there's just not that much time left in the day, and the weekends are spent doing the things that we didn't get done through the week. And then there's the hobbies that we have and all the things they have to do. And plus, you know, you're binge watching Longmire on Netflix. So yeah, some of it is just laziness. One of the reasons that we don't make room for others is fear. To invite somebody to spend time with you, you have to face the fear of rejection. What if they say no? You've got to deal with the fear that what you have isn't good enough, or that your house isn't fancy enough. And if you meet them at a restaurant, what if they're used to eating at restaurants that you can't afford to eat at? I mean, not all of you are sophisticated enough for the Waffle House, are you? You also have to encounter the terror that there's going to be a couple of awkward moments and maybe your jokes don't hit just right. But here's the thing that stands in the way the most, is pride. And with that in mind, look back at our text in Luke chapter 7. Start with me again at verse 36. One of the Pharisees desired him that he would eat with him, and he went into the Pharisee's house, and he sat down to meat. And behold, a woman in the city, which was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus sat at meat at the Pharisee's house, she brought the alabaster box of ointment, stood at his feet behind him, weeping, and began to wash his feet with tears, and wiped them with the hairs of her head, and kissed his feet, and anointed them with ointment. Now, when the Pharisee which had bidden him saw it, he spake within himself, saying, This man, if he were a prophet, would have known of what manner of woman this is that touches him, for she is a sinner. You see right here, because of pride, Simon thought that he was too good to have this woman in her house, in his house. I mean, I can't imagine how much courage it took this woman just to show up. I mean, let me ask you this. Would you go to somebody's house if you knew that they thought they were too good for you? Would you? I mean, if somebody gave you the impression that they're better than you, would you go and eat with them? You wouldn't. And I wouldn't blame you one bit if you found something better to do. I mean, if somebody invited you to dinner and you feel like the only thing they're doing is they need somebody there to look down upon, would you go? No. Or if you thought the only reason they're inviting you is because they want somebody to be amazed at how great they are, you wouldn't go. You'd stay home and start your third rewatch of Longmire. When you give the impression that you're better than somebody, you're smarter than them, that you're more spiritual, that you've got street smarts or anything like that, they're not going to listen to anything you have to say about God. They're just not. Simon felt like he was too good for this woman who had been a sinner. But that wasn't the worst thing about Simon. Look at verse 44. Jesus, after giving the parable, he says in verse 44, it says, he turned to the woman and he said unto Simon, see this woman, I entered into thine house, and thou gave me no water for my feet, but she's washed my feet with tears and wiped them with the hairs of her head. Thou gave me no kiss, but this woman, since the time I came in, hath not ceased to kiss my feet. My head, you did not anoint it with oil, but this woman has anointed my feet with ointment. So here's the thing. The reason that Simon thought that he was too good for this woman is because Simon thought he was too good for Jesus. He didn't give Jesus the common, customary courtesies when he arrived. He didn't greet Jesus. He didn't offer him any refreshments. He was too good for Jesus. I mean, would you be welcome at that house? Feel welcome if you were Jesus? I don't go to preachers' meetings anymore, and I'm going to tell you why. I went to them, and stuff, and I hadn't been in a while, and I saw this guy that I hadn't seen in a long time, and I was really excited to see him. I really was. And I go up to him, and we're doing the old shaking your hand thing, how you doing, old buddy? And we're doing that, and he's shaking my hand. He is. But the whole time that he's shaking my hand, he's doing this. He's looking around to see who all else is there. He was looking for somebody that was more important than me. That's what Simon was doing with Jesus. He was not giving him even courtesy. He didn't have his servants, take his coat and his shoes and stuff like that. He didn't greet him with a sincere kiss on the cheek or a handshake. He didn't offer him anything to refresh him. It seems like the only reason that Simon invited Jesus was to let Jesus know how unwelcome he was. And I'm pretty sure that that's the case. But I want you to look at something very important. I want you to look back at verse 44. I want you to look at a phrase there that is pretty significant. The Bible says that Jesus turned to the woman. What that means is that Jesus turned his back on Simon. And if you read the Gospel of Luke, from verse 44 till the end of it, Jesus doesn't have anything to do with the Pharisees anymore. They have interactions, But this is the moment when Jesus turned his back on them. Why? Well, they were too good for him. They were too good for the people that he loved. They were too good for those who were sinners. But there's another aspect of pride that I think kind of causes us to draw back. And that is that, well, the fear of what others think. And all that is runaway pride. You see, as far as Simon was concerned, Jesus had already ruined his reputation. Now you can go back to chapter 5. I've got it in my notes. We'll find it this time. In Luke chapter 5, look at verse 27. And this could be a retelling of Zacchaeus, I'm not sure. But in verse 27, it says, after these things, he went forth, Jesus, and he saw a publican named Levi sitting at their seat of custom, and he said unto him, follow me. And he left all, he rose up, and he followed him. And Levi made a great feast in his own house. And there was this great company of publicans and others that sat down with them. But their scribes and Pharisees murmured against his disciples, saying, why do you eat and drink with publicans and sinners? Levi became a disciple of Christ. Is he also called Matthew? Is that right, Scott? Do you know? Yeah, Matthew. Okay. Matthew. He's got a gospel named after him. How did he usher people into the kingdom of God? He had a dinner and invited all of them to meet the man who saved his soul. That's how he did it. But notice what happened is all of these people were at Matthew's house, or Levi's house, could be Zacchaeus, I don't know. But they're all at his house, and Jesus is right there in the middle of them. You see, he wasn't too good for them. He didn't look at them as if they were less than him. He didn't look down upon them. He was right there in the middle of them, and they were having a great time. But these people who were too good to hang out with the bad people, they were murmuring and they were talking. He says, why is he with all the wrong people? Why is he not hanging out with the cool crowd? Why is he not worried about the movers and shakers, those that can help him achieve his goal? He was hanging out with people who were going to be a bad influence on him. If you're too good, if you're too pure, if you're too righteous to hang out with rough people, they're okay with that. They'll go on without you. They will. And you're going to be the one missing out because the roughest people tell the best stories. They really do. I mean, they're a whole lot more fun than the old stick-in-the-mud Pharisee types. They're a lot more fun than I am. If you invite me to dinner twice, then you've heard all my stories twice. I've only got 3 stories. I've got the elevator shaft story, I've got the falling through a roof story, and I've got the cracker story. And 1/3 of those stories are made up. Need to hang out with people. They got some good stories. And if you're worried what other people think, turn back again to Luke chapter 7. If you're worried about what other people think, in Luke chapter 7, Jesus is telling them about John Baptist. And John Baptist, he's the best. But look at verse 31. And the Lord said, whereunto shall I liken the men of this generation, and to what are they like? They're like children sitting in the marketplace and calling one another and saying, we've piped unto you and you haven't danced. We've mourned unto you and you haven't wept. John Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say that he hath the devil. The Son of Man is come eating and drinking, and you say, behold, a gluttonous man, a wine-bibber, a friend of publicans and sinners. Wisdom is justified of her children. He's describing a generation of children who are trying to get each other's attention. Does that sound anything like social media? Now, every social media post, every social media post is a cry for attention. And if you don't say the things that are bad that they think is bad, you're right, they're going to dox you. You're going to do it. If you don't think things are funny, all right, say anyway. But look what Jesus said. He said John the Baptist is on one end of the spectrum, and you said he's got the devil in him. Jesus is on the other end of the spectrum, and you say he's a wine bibber and a glutton and a drunk and no good and hanging out with the bad people. And Jesus, he's telling this story to let you know it doesn't matter what you do. If they think they're better than you, they're going to talk bad about you. That's it. So you might as well hang out with the rough people. They're so much more fun. They are. It doesn't matter what you think. Pride keeps people from making room for others. For some, it's the pride that makes them feel like they're too good. For others, for some, it's the pride that won't let them risk their reputation with others. But I think the greatest pride that gets in the way, it's not that you think you're too good for others. Some people think that they're not good enough. I mean, I've been invited to spend time with some people, and the entire conversation is them giving me their resume, telling me what they've accomplished or what they've earned or what they've accumulated or what they can do or how tough that they are or how bad that they are or how mistreated that they've been. And the whole time, I'm wondering why do you feel like you have to impress me? I'm not that hard to impress. I'm really not. I mean, if you can button your shirt right the first time, I'm impressed. You're laughing. I was at church, a whole service, my shirt was like this. Nobody would tell me. So what is it that Jesus did? Jesus made room for the gospel. When I tell you to do what Jesus did, make room for the gospel. And how did he do that? With something as commonplace as inviting somebody to join you. That's it. How was he able to do it? Well, the Bible tells us this. When he was in the form of God, it wasn't robbery to be equal with God, but he made of himself no reputation. He took on himself the form of a servant, and it was made into the likeness of men. So listen to this. Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, made of himself no reputation. He didn't make it about him. He made it about the people that he loved. And because of that, he was comfortable with everyone. So I'm going to ask you, do what Jesus did. Ask the ladies to come. Time of prayer. As we do this, I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. I'm going to ask you, I don't think anybody here thinks you're better than others. I certainly hope not. But maybe some of you are afraid that others think they're better than you. Okay. It's not about them, is it? It's about Jesus Christ. And if Jesus Christ was right here this morning, I can tell you exactly what he would do. He would look you in the eye and ask you if he could come to your place after church.